Hey guys, John here again. We are now 3 weeks out from my Glory Kickboxing fight in Orlando, Glory 67. And I was about 175 pounds this morning, and I have to weigh in at 154, so we're just about 20 pounds over with 3 weeks to go. That's perfect. I wanted to do this last video now in that series on how I made it into Glory Kickboxing so that we can wrap it up. I want to talk about the promotion, specifically Friday night fights. And I alluded to this in the first video I did, where I kind of gave a brief summary of everything and why Friday night fights I think is the most important and the most pertinent reason that I made it into the Glory promotion is for a few reasons. One, they were the last couple of fights I had before going to Glory. Two, I want to talk about kind of the relationships you build as a fighter and how that can benefit you and your reputation as well. So these fights, what happened was, I remember the day there was a Facebook post, the first fight I fought for Friday night fights. There was a Facebook post from a Florida guy saying his fighter wasn't going to be competing. They were only 6 days away from the fight. It was the main event up in New York, and they needed a replacement fast. I happened to be close to weight. I think they wanted it to be at 155. And so I said, hey, let the guy call me. The promoter up there is Justin for Friday night fights. So he gave me a call, asked me where I was at. I told him I'd prefer to weigh in at 160 just because it was only 6 days notice. And I remember when I got the call too, we were at a park. My wife, my son, and I were at a park. He was playing on the slide. I stepped away to take the call, and I said I'd take the fight. So I ended up fighting a guy named Danny Millett out of New York. So of course they want somebody to be there. I'm sure he sold a ton of tickets, things like that. And again, I only had 6 days. So I told you guys, you kind of always have to be ready. You always have to have that base layer. But this really left me no time to kind of specialize or really even research or anything like that. It was pretty much just pack your bags and go. So I head up there. It wasn't a pretty fight, but I think what they really liked is that I said I'd show up, and I did. Fought hard. Fight didn't go my way. I ended up getting cut open really bad on the back of my head. I'm sure some of you have seen those pictures with some elbows to the back of the head. A few times they wanted to stop the fight. I opted to continue, and I often think back, and I was getting paid flat, so there's no win bonus, so that didn't affect my decision. I could have stopped and won via DQ. It didn't affect me to the point where I thought that was necessary, so I kept fighting, and he ended up getting me in the 4th round. It was a 5-round fight. But that being said, I told those guys, so I talked to the promoter and the matchmaker while I was there and just told them, hey guys, thanks for having me. Great show, and it is a really, really well-run show. And just told them, hey, if you need anybody, maybe try to get me on a show with an actual fight camp. I'd appreciate that. And they were cool. They said they would. So I come back home, and a few months later, they call me up and they want to offer me a fight, and it would have been probably the toughest fight I would have had to date. I was supposed to schedule to fight Elvis Gashi. He's undefeated right now. He currently fights for Glory as well. I think he's 22-0 at 155. And I accepted the fight. I had, I think, almost 8 weeks. So I'm training for this fight pretty hard. And a few weeks before the fight, so it was maybe 2 weeks before, Justin, the promoter, who also manages some of those fighters, called me up and said, hey, I'm pulling him out. He's got a nagging injury. It was nothing serious, but he just didn't want to risk. Obviously, he's highly touted. He's contracted with Glory as well. He didn't want to risk him getting hurt. So I got that ripped away from me. But I didn't get upset. Thanked him anyways. Keep me in mind. So a few months go by, and sure enough, I get another short notice offer. It's from Friday Night Fights again, and they pick up the phone. They need somebody short notice. Their main event popped out again. This time it's against a tougher guy than my first fight with them, named Eddie Martinez. And this was easier fight in the beginning. And he's a Muay Thai guy, so he picked up the pace as it went on. I started strong and faded. He started slow and picked it up. And it ended up being real rough for me. Traditional Muay Thai, lots of clinch. Not my thing. Don't like it. Don't train it a lot. So I think I took that fight on maybe 10 days notice. So really short. And I think it was their first card that they were going to have on Fight Pass, UFC Fight Pass. So they really needed me to step up for that. So that aside, I go home from that New York trip. My leg's pretty beat up. Not a fun time. But I'm running my gym. This is now even a couple of months after this. I think maybe I got my Glory contract back in like middle of last year, summer. It was summer, so like July I think was my first Glory fight, and this was another short notice. So I'm just gonna go into how I got into it, and then we'll talk about those fights specifically later. But I was sitting at my desk at my gym at one of my locations and talking. I want to say to my wife on the phone, and I got a phone call, and I saw it was Justin from Friday Night Fights. I told her I'd call her back, and I answered the phone. Now, 2 days earlier, before I got this phone call, I tore my MCL and my meniscus. Not completely, but I was hurting bad. And I was actually scheduled to fight somebody else coming up soon in an MMA fight. And I was, trying to make up my mind whether I'd do that fight or not. Justin calls me. I pick up the phone. He goes, "Hey, John, we need you, bud." He goes, "I know you're the guy." So I knew it was already a short notice thing. And he goes, "It's Glory." He goes, "You can't pass this up. I want you to take this fight." A big ticket seller in New York, because it was at Madison Square Garden, pulled out. We need you to fill the spot. It's 5 days away, or 6. It was 6 days away, because I think they called me on a Friday. Weigh-ins were going to be Thursday. So I tell him, I'm like, hey man, I appreciate the call. Thanks for thinking of me. I normally would. I just tore my knee. I can try to find somebody for you and let you know. And he goes, "Okay, man, call me back if you have anybody. It's super important." I said, "Thanks." And I hung up the phone. Before I called my wife back, I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, just kind of thinking, staring out the window. And I picked up the phone, called him back, and said, "I'll be there." Then he was concerned about my knee. I told him, "Don't worry about it. I'll show up. I'll fight." So that's how I ended up getting into Glory. I get to Glory, we get to the show. I start meeting people there, and I let them know, hey, after the fight especially, I couldn't throw kicks, my legs busted up. I wouldn't have done this for anybody else, but I wanted to fight for you guys. And then that's when they decided after that fight to offer me a contract, because it was just a one-fight deal at first, and then they offered me an actual contract, multi-fight contract. Why this is important is it goes into what I was saying. It's not always the smartest thing, but me building that reputation for taking those short notice tough fights and fighting hard got me here. Also, it's important to make sure you're building relationships with the people that you want to be around and the people you want to be associated with, and not just trying to get things from them, but trying to build a mutually beneficial relationship, so that when the opportunity arose for a big fight opportunity, these other promoters that had nothing to do with that show are calling me or hooking me up with opportunities, or my fighters even. I have the opportunity now to bring some of my amateur guys with me when I go to New York and things like that. And so it's fun, good experience for them. That being said, guys, that kind of wraps up the main series about how I got into Glory, and it goes back into the short notice stuff, the tough stuff. And as long as you're always ready, that shouldn't be an issue. And I'm not saying I always was. But if you are, and you should be, you'll definitely do much better than I did, and hopefully get there quicker and get a few more dollars in your pocket. So if there's any questions, guys, leave them in the comments. Please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys soon.